Welcome to the Gridiron Expert. Next up on our team previews, we're going to be looking at the Clemson Tigers, a very intriguing team entering this college football season. And we have Will Vandervoort joining us on the channel today. Will, thanks for being on with us.
Hey, Connor, thanks for having me, man. It's always fun to come in and talk to a young guy like yourself that's kind of getting yourself going and get started. Good to come over here and help out and, talk Clemson football and the Atlantic Coast Conference and college football. I'm all about it, man. So, yeah, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Well, before we get into the position groups for the Clemson Tigers, Will, please tell our viewers and subscribers where they can find your content.
Yeah, they can find us. I'm the senior writer at the Clemson Insider, the Clemson Insider, or as we like to say, TCI. You can find my work there. You can find my personal Twitter is at Steeler Will. That's because I'm a huge Steelers fan. So I just kind of took that. It's been my brand ever since Twitter started, or X now started. I've just kept it and left it there because people just know me as that. So at Steeler Will on X, and then you can follow our website, our company website, I should say. You can find at the Clemson Insider on Facebook. You can follow us there, or on X at ClemsonInsider.com, as well as on Instagram or whatever social media is out there, is at Clemson Insider. So you can find us on all those different ways. There's so many social media platforms. My boss does them all. So, what's ever out there, you can find it.
Well, you briefly mentioned Pittsburgh there, and I see that Steeler Super Bowl poster in the background there,
Yeah.
and yeah, and they had the steel curtain back in the 70s, and Clemson might have somewhat of a steel curtain itself this year with a couple of the best defensive linemen in the country. Of course, we'll get into that later in this show, but we'll start off on the offensive side of the football at quarterback. Obviously, Klubnik returns this year. What's the expectation for Cade?
Well, I think the expectation for Cade is to be one of the best quarterbacks in the country, and I think he can get there. I think he was. You can make an argument he was there last year. I mean, 43 touchdowns, over 4,100 yards of total offense last year. Didn't turn the ball over, 6 interceptions. Took care of the football well, whether he was running it or throwing it. And so, he's. A lot of people think he's going to be really good this year. I think he is too. I think he took a step in the second half of the season of really where he just grew in this quarterback position. And this is his third year now with Garrett Riley, Clemson's offensive coordinator. And you think about it, you got a quarterback and an offensive coordinator that have now been together 3 years. You got a quarterback who started each of the last 2 years. Plus, got a couple starts there at the end of his freshman year as well. So they've worked together for a long time. They know the ins and out of each other. They know their strengths and weaknesses as a play caller and as a quarterback, and how they work with each other. Those are all things that are going to benefit Clemson. And then you throw in the fact they bring back Clemson's the only team in the country at wide receiver that brings back three wide receivers with over 600 yards from the season before. Also, what people don't know, or nobody talks about, is they're also bringing back Tyler Brown, who was redshirted last year because of injury. He led the Tigers in receiving the year before that. And so technically, you're bringing back four receivers with over 500 yards when they were productive and healthy. And then you throw in Tristan Smith at wide receiver. They went out, got out of the transfer portal. And now they got that guy, that Mike Williams type guy that can, jump up and snag the ball out of the air. They've just added to that wide receiving core. He's got plenty of weapons at receiver. Got some question marks at tight end and running back, but they really like Gideon Davison at running back, the freshman. People told me they were comparing him to Travis Etienne in the spring.
That's a heck of
Same
a comparison there.
Yes, same body type, same explosion. So we'll see if that translates to game days. Totally different when you practice as you do in games. We'll see. So there's still a question mark there. But if he is what they say he is, then, like you said, that's going to be pretty good for Clemson. And then Adam Randall, they moved from wide receiver to running back. He's got natural running instincts. You saw that in the game against Texas. You saw it against SMU when he took that kickoff return that set up the game-winning field goal for Clemson in the ACC championship game. So, they feel better there than what people probably feel like, than the fans feel like, or the media feels like, right? And then they got a veteran offensive line in front of Cade he's got 4 of the 5 starters returning, and the guy who's the 5th guy, by the way, has started a majority of the last 2 years, and Harris Sewell, who's going to be starting at left guard. So they feel real good about the five guys they got starting. They feel good about the guys that are backing up on the offensive line. So offensively, they're in really good shape, and that's what makes them so dangerous, and that's what also what leads to the expectations of what Cade Klubnik can be, because all the things that he needs to be a good quarterback are in front of him, which is a veteran offensive line. He's got a veteran receiving core, and he's got some talented young running backs as well.
Yeah, it looks like as of right now on the offensive line, they're going to be starting three, was it fifth year guys, and then and then and then a fourth year senior, and then
Yep.
as you mentioned, Sewell stepping in at left guard there.
Yeah, so it all starts with I think the the most surprised I should say Clemson was Ryan Lithicum at center last year. He came in his first year starter. He hasn't. They didn't think at the time he was progressing the way they would hoped his first 3 years, but last year the light bulb came on for him, and he just took off. And he just became an All ACC caliber center, and really was, I mean, probably one of the best position players they had on that unit last year. And I think it played a big role in why Clemson had the success they had a year ago on offense. And then of course they got Tristan Lee back at left tackle. Obviously, they got their starting right tackle back in Miller, and then they got man, my brain is not working just now. Hold on, at right guard is a guy who's a like
Oh,
you said, a
Walker
fifth year
Parks.
senior. Walker Parks, excuse me, thank you. He's back for his 5th year, and so they feel real good about those four guys. And as I mentioned, Harris Sewell, he started the tail end of last season because of injuries with Marcus Tate and those guys, so he played a lot at right guard and left guard. But he's going to be playing that left guard position this year, and he's also the backup center as well. So he's a versatile guy that can play pretty much all. He can play anywhere on the offensive line, to be honest with you. But pretty much there's definitely as guard and center positions. He can play all three, and that gives him a little bit of flexibility with him. But he's going to be the main guy you see there. I think Thurman's coming back also as well. He tore his ACL in the Pittsburgh game, or broke his foot in the Pittsburgh game. He's going to be back. He's going to give him more depth at those guard positions. They got a couple other guys too that are coming back that played a lot last year as well that are going to help them. So they're in good shape on the offensive line. There's no doubt it's probably the strength of that offense, to be honest with you.
And so, so Thurman's probably going to be a backup in the interior.
Yeah, I would think. Yeah, he's going to be back up probably either at right guard or left guard.
Okay,
He can also play some tackle, but they really like him. The future, I think, for him is going to be inside. But he can play tackle as well, which is what he did toward the end of last year as well. He played a little bit of when Tristan Lee got a little banged up. He came in and played left tackle, and that's actually where he broke his foot. Was at Pittsburgh playing left
gotcha.
tackle. Yeah, but he can play. Another guy he can play anywhere. They cross train all those guys, and like Tristan Lee can play inside if they need him to. So they've pretty much moved to everybody. They can move people to different positions at tackle. They're real good about doing that.
And it looks like the true freshmen Braden Jacobs and Easton Ware are they the backup offensive tackles here?
Probably. We got to go see what it's going to be like when they get into camp. I would say more than likely, yes, because that's where they're not as deep is at those positions. They're more deeper on the middle and the interior than they are on the outside. So I would say yes. Is that going to be their permanent positions? That remains to be seen. But I think going into this season, that's the idea the coaches would have, and then they would just kind of see where they go from there with camp. Camp is always with offensive line. It's such a fluid situation because you got to understand in like the skill guys are taken care of for the most part in practices.
Yeah.
They do 7-on-7 drills, or they put the jerseys on them, but they can't be touched. The interior guys on the offensive defensive line, if they're healthy, they're practicing, and they're practicing the way they have to because they have to. They have to hit each other. They have to feel that contact because they got to get used to it. And so it's always a fluid situation with your interior linemen because they're more acceptable to injuries because they're going to get hit more than anybody else on the team. Those guys get hit more, and so it's always a fluid situation. So yeah, that's why I say that's the plan. But as we all know, injuries do happen in football, and sometimes you got to change things on the fly. Like Clemson had to do a lot last year with their offensive line.
There's that sigh of relief for every single college football team that doesn't sustain a significant injury in fall camp, especially along the lines of scrimmage. It's always yeah, it's nice knowing when you're fully healthy going into the season up front. Will, you briefly mentioned the receivers several minutes ago. You were talking about some of the guys that are going to be stepping up this year, as obviously as well as those top three guys that return for this fall. Do you think that there's a true alpha in this room, or do you think that all, say, your top 3 to 4 receivers are going to be pretty balanced in their catches?
Yeah, I mean, again, I think when you look at this group, there's all these guys can be alpha guys, right? When you look at T.J. Moore, Tyler Brown, Antonio Williams, but I think Antonio Williams, he's the alpha of the room. He's the senior. He's the guy that I know he's listed as a redshirt junior, but he's a senior. This is his final year at Clemson. He's the guy they all look up to. He's the guy that Garrett Riley is going to work this offensive round because he's that kind of guy that kind of like if you will kind of they center the offensive round and he gets everybody else going at that wide receiving core. And so I think he's the guy when you say okay he's the alpha of the room, but it doesn't mean he's the number one receiver. I think any of those three guys can be the number one receiver. I think Tyler Brown has that personality to be the number one receiver as well. So when you look at it, you got Brian Wesco Jr., you got Tyler Brown, you got T.J. Moore, you got Antonio Williams. Those are four alpha guys. Those are four guys that could take over. They're all good leaders. They're all playmakers. They all can play every single one of those positions. And when they cross train, they do it all. And then you look at a guy like Tristan Smith who's come in. I think he's going to be huge for them because of what he can bring at 6'5", 205 pounds. He's the transfer, had over 900 yards receiving and 6 touchdowns a year ago. They like him a lot. And then you got this guy. And keep in mind, they call him Kink Kelly. His name is My Son Kelly. But they call him Tink, and he's a local kid here. He's an athlete. He can play wide receiver. He can play defensive back. They really like him, so you're going to see him a little bit probably in the mix too this year as a playmaker. And then Cole Turner, another guy, 6'1", 185 pounds. He's a speedster as well, and so you'll see him on the field side helping out Bryant Wesco, probably his backup. So they got, I think, 6, 8, 9 guys at that wide receiver position that are guys that can make plays, that can, there's not much of a drop off if one guy goes down. Another guy can come in, and there's not much of a drop off. And I think that's a luxury for Clemson as they continue to move forward.
When you look at this receiver room uh, from a whole perspective here, obviously, when you look at the best receiving corps in the country, you're looking at Ohio State, uh, Texas, Alabama. I actually think Auburn could be up there this year. Do you think Clemson rivals those receiving corps this year?
Without a doubt. I mean, they're the only team in the country that brings 3 wide receivers with over 600 yards each, right? And so when you look at Antonio Williams, you look at Bryant Wesco, and you look at T.J. Moore, and they all had their moments, individual games last year. You remember Clemson was T.J. Moore was lighting up this Texas secondary. Bryant Wesco, he was arguably, you could have called him the ACC player, the ACC championship game MVP because he lit up SMU, and then Antonio Williams led the team in receiving, and he lit up several guys last year. He also made some big plays in that Texas game. And what they did against Texas, it really showed how good they are because nobody did to Texas what K. Klubnik and those receivers did, including Ohio State. Nobody lit up those that secondary for Texas like that. Texas gave up 7 touchdown passes all season. 3 were to Clemson. So I mean, that's impressive that Clemson was that good against them. And even Stark said it at the end of the game in the post game press conference. He said that they were worried about K. Klubnik coming in because he can really kill his own defense. And then if you go man, he's going to do what he did with T.J. Moore. And he said that's the kind of quarterback that's real dangerous to play because he knows how to find the open guys in his own defense. And he also knows how to attack a man-to-man and take advantage of the one-on-one situations, which is what happened when they went straight man in the second half because they couldn't stop Clemson passing attack. And so then TJ Moore just lit him up. So and then you throw in a guy like Tyler Brown, who I said the year before was the best receiver on the team the year before. He ended up getting hurt last year, and so he wasn't as productive. Last year he got basically redshirted, and so you're bringing him in. So he's another guy that you add to that had over 500 plus receiving yards and 6 touchdowns. I mean, when you look at what they have, those 4 receivers, there's nobody in the country from a production standpoint that matches what they've done. Now, you can say Ohio State's got the most 5-star receivers, right? And then they got the best, probably individual receiver. Alabama, you can say, has maybe arguably the best individual receiver. But Alabama's room is not even close to Clemson's. And nobody has the production already in the bank, knowing what they can do, like Clemson's does. And it doesn't matter if they play Texas or if they played Appalachian State. Those wide receivers killed everybody they played last year. And so you know what you got, and you got a quarterback who can get them the ball. And that's Cade Klubnik, as I mentioned earlier, 43 touchdowns last year. A lot of people don't realize that. I mean, his numbers were, and it's because of his wide receivers, his numbers were as good as anybody's. I think that I saw a stat where he was with not Michael Vick, Lamar Jackson. He was with Deshaun Watson. He was with, I'm trying to think, a couple of other quarterbacks that all had the same numbers he had, and they were all Heisman Trophy finalists. He's the first one of the 7 quarterbacks that put up those kind of numbers that he put up last year that wasn't a Heisman Trophy winner or finalist.
And
That's
you
how
look at,
good.
yeah,
That's how good he was.
yeah, and he's right now he's top 3, I believe, in Heisman odds entering this
Right.
season. He might be second actually overall right now in Heisman
It's
odds.
exactly, and so it's a combination of both. He's got good receivers, and he's a good quarterback. He's progressed and became a better quarterback. And a lot of people wondered, like, oh, what was Cade Klubnik going to be last year? Well, the year before, he didn't have anybody to throw the football to. Let's just be honest. And so he was trying to do it all on his own and make plays, and it didn't work out too well for him. He held onto the ball too long. He fumbled. He was indecisive. Last year, he was very decisive. He took care of the football. He made good decisions, and he had playmakers that when he got on the ball, they did something with the ball. And so it was a combination of both. So this receiving core plus Cade Klubnik gives Clemson one of the best passing games in college football.
When I was watching that Clemson offense against Texas, it was giving me flashbacks to what Clemson used to look like offensively, and it was nice to see Clemson looking like that again. So when you look at this offense from a whole, offensive line, check, check, or check plus plus. Receivers,
Right?
check plus plus. Quarterback is obviously there with Cade Klubnik. I guess the only uncertain room on this offense would be at running back. Of course, I know they bring in Davidson, who has a really high ceiling, and he's a true freshman. So
Mm-hmm.
there's still some unknowns, I guess, with this running back room. What are your thoughts? What are your takeaways with the Clemson running game this year?
Yeah, so the most interesting thing about this Clemson running back room is nobody left after the spring. So here's what Clemson's got right now. They got a lot of unknowns. You mentioned Gideon Davison, the true freshman out of Lynchburg, Virginia, that they feel like is Travis Etienne 2.0. And that's saying a lot. I mean, that's compliment to him because Travis Etienne's only the greatest running back ever in the Atlantic Coast Conference history, and arguably one of the top 5 running backs of all time in the history of college football when you look at his numbers and what he produced, right, in his 4 years at Clemson. So you look at a guy like Gideon Davison, you say, okay, everybody says he's got that kind of potential, but I used the P word there, potential. So there's question marks around it, right? Adam Randall, they moved from wide receiver to running back, as I said earlier. He's a guy that they feel really good about because he's got natural running instincts. And plus, let's be honest, he can catch the ball out of the backfield, so it's going to make him a weapon as a pass catcher out of the backfield. They really like him and his instincts. Keith Adams Jr. is a guy that they call Hammerhead because he's just so strong and physical, and he's hard to bring down. Jarvis Green, he's coming back from injury. They really like him. So what's he going to do? He's a local kid from Irmo. He's a redshirt sophomore. And they got David Izumu, who was last year's freshman. He really came along, had a very good spring. They think he's probably either number 2 or to be in this running back room right now, right? So he's going to be in the mix to start. And then Jay Hayes, he tore his ACL in the ACC championship game. He was really coming on last year, and so how's he going to be coming back off that torn ACL? Is he going to be back to where he was before the injury? So there's a lot of question marks, but one thing they don't lack, and this is what I've told a lot of Clemson fans, they don't lack talent. Um, I remind everybody says, "Oh, they've never been this much questions at running back at Clemson." Like you're forgetting 2017. That was Travis
Yep.
Etienne's freshman year. Um, they didn't know what they had in Travis Etienne. Saw the potential, but they didn't know what they had yet. They had a couple other guys on there that were more experienced veteran backs, but had played a lot of football. Tavian Feaster comes to mind as a guy that was on that team, and he actually started the season at running back. They had C.J. Fuller. He was on that team, and so they had some veteran guys on the team that had played, and then they had this running back that they just we think he's got a chance to be really good. It turned out to be Travis Etienne, and he was great. And so that's what this class reminds me of, this running back room, because you got a guy who they think can be pretty good, and then they got a couple of veteran guys that they really like, that they think, okay, if this kid doesn't need to come along right now, that he can kind of stay behind them, and they feel real good about the production they can get. So I think with that veteran offensive line and the kind of passing game that they have, defenses just can't load up and stop the run. And I think that's going to allow those running backs to be able to get in space and make some plays.
All right, Will, fill in the blank for me. Clemson in 2025 will have a top blank offense in college football.
They will have a top 10 offense. And the reason I say top 10 and not top 5 is because Dabo is, if he gets leads in big games, big leads against teams that are inferior competition, he calls off the dogs. And so where they could put up numbers like you see other coaches do, they'll put up these big numbers and score 70, 80 points. Dabo doesn't do that. He'd rather get his younger players experience. And so he puts them in real game situations so they have that experience. Because his thing is, I get them the experience now. That way when we need them come postseason, these guys know what to do. They've been in these situations, so they know how to handle it if they're called upon. And it worked out for those great years, those Clemson teams they had. That's why they were so good. It's because they were so deep. Because this is what he did. So I'm gonna say top 10 offense, top 10 scoring offense, top 10 in total offense, probably top 10 in passing offense.
And this, in your opinion, is probably the best offense for Clemson since pre-COVID.
Um, I would say probably the last year of Trevor Lawrence, which is
Okay,
2020.
2020. Okay.
Yeah, so I would say that. I mean, that was a really good Clemson offense in 2020. A lot of people don't think about that, because of COVID, but they, Trevor set the Clemson record that year, and I think it was an ACC record at the time for passing yards in the season. And so they were explosive, man. They could move the football against anybody. So I'll say since 2020.
Moving over to the Clemson defense. So PFF just recently put out their defensive line rankings, and they had Clemson at number one, and a lot of reason for that here with the talent that they have, including two of the best defensive linemen in all of college football with TJ Parker and then Peter Woods. So
Mm-hmm.
last year, Clemson, statistically speaking, was not great against the run in ACC play. So, Will, do you think that this defensive line can take major strides this year?
Well, yeah, and part of it is because they went out and got a guy like Will Helt at defensive end, a 6'6", 265-pound junior out of Purdue, who was one of the top defensive ends in the Big Ten the last couple of years. That's the biggest thing, right? Because on that side of the line last year, they had an issue because they just didn't have any depth over there, and they just didn't have the bodies they needed. They thought they could slide Peter Woods over there and he would be productive, and he was for a little while. But people started realizing that Peter Woods wasn't the same Peter Woods outside as he was inside, and he's more effective inside. And so people would they couldn't run to him, but they could do other things against him. And they were starting to exploit that. And then so Clemson had to move him back outside. And then that opened up that spot on the end. Dean Hoff just wasn't ready yet to be that guy. Neither was Lawson. Those two guys just weren't there, progressive at that point. So they needed that big physical body on the outside that could contain the run and set the edge over there. And they just didn't have it consistently, and they got exploited. And that's one reason why they struggled. Also, part of it was they just were piss poor in tackling. I'm just going to call it like it is. They were just not. Did not live up to their potential as far as tackling. I don't know what caused that. If that was scheme, if that was motivation, if that was just not lifting enough weights in the off season. I don't know what it was, but I'll tell you this much: it was Vince at Clemson as far as yards per carry since 1975. That's
Wow.
how historic it was. So it was bad. They couldn't. If anybody watched that Texas game, you saw it.
Yeah.
And there was gaping holes. Guys were running through. There was missed tackles all over the place. And they went and got Tom Allen, former defensive coordinator at Pittsburgh, former Indiana head coach. Excuse me, Penn State, former Indiana head coach, who's known for coming in and fixing issues like this, and he immediately made an impact in the spring with the drills he was doing and tackling drills and things of that nature. You saw a difference in Peter Woods. He's slimmed down. He's got more of a. He's still the same big, like he's a big guy, but he's not fat. Like
Yeah.
he's taking off a lot of that fat,
Pure
and he's
muscle.
yeah, he's more muscle now, and he just looks good. And you could say that. I just think Tom Allen coming in and kind of laying the law down and just saying, guys, this is why you were bad. It was effort. It was lack of execution. It was these things. It was not being prepared. These are why you were bad last year. And I think, he's kind of addressed that. And I think you're going to see the difference in this Clemson. And it's going to start up front because you do have talent. Peter Woods, obviously. TJ Parker, obviously. Will Helt, obviously. I mean, those are probably three of the best defensive linemen you're going to find in the country on one team. And so they're going to be really different this year as far as stopping the run. There's no doubt. And by the way, I forgot Demonte Capehart, who to me has the highest ceiling of anybody. I
Really?
think this guy,
Okay.
yes, this guy has the potential to be an all-pro defensive tackle in the NFL. The way he can shed blocks, how strong he is. People don't know about him because he just gets injured and he's been injured, but his ceiling is higher than anybody I just mentioned, including Peter Woods, because he hasn't come close to reaching it yet. And he's just so, like, if you watch him, go watch tape on him and watch him when he's healthy, what he does to the center and guards he plays. He's unblockable. He reminds me a lot of a guy named Chester McLaughlin that played at Clemson back in the day. And that's who Chester McLaughlin was. He just physically would dominate his opponent. And that's what Demonte Capehart is capable of doing and has done when he's healthy. They got him back this year. He's going to solidify that middle, and that's going to allow Peter Woods to kind of, he's going to be the Dexter Lawrence to Peter Woods being Christian Wilkins. He's
Got
going
you.
to allow Peter Wilkins' athleticism to shine because Peter's not going to be double teamed like he was because they're going to have to double team Demonte.
So the starters are definitely in place here up front. How did the backups look?
Yeah, I think they look good. They got some guys that they really like. Let's start in the middle. I think Phylon Green really came on last year. He's a guy they're really excited about. They think he's going to take that next step in his progression. Vic Burley had a very good spring. He's the redshirt sophomore. Came in with Peter Woods and those guys, highly recruited former 5-star. They really like his ability and what he can do. And I think him playing that backup role is going to be big for him this year. You're going to see him get more snaps on the interior. And then on the edges, I mentioned Jaheim Lawson, a local kid here from Daniel High School near Clemson. If you probably know his brother, Shaq Lawson, who was one of the dominant Clemson defensive ends back in the day. He's a guy they really like. They think he's progressed really well and had a very good spring. And also, Cade Dienhoff, another guy, had a great spring. And then this is a guy you need to remember. Name is Darian Mayo. Like Demonte Capehart, he's a defensive end, 6'5", 255. 6'7", 265. He's a redshirt freshman out of York, Pennsylvania. He's a guy that you need to pay attention to, number 49. He has raw athletic ability. He's gotten stronger. He's tall. He's everything you want. The ceiling on him is extremely high. I mean, if the light bulb comes on for him, which is what he showed at times in the spring, if that light bulb comes on for him, you're talking about this kid is a future first round top 15 pick in the NFL.
Wow.
That's his body type. That's who he is. And I really think this kid has a chance this year to step up and show he can, step in behind a Will Helt or a TJ Parker and be a playmaker and really help the Clemson defense from a depth standpoint.
And so on the field, the talent is there. You mentioned the coordinator change for the defense. So you think Clemson's run defense and their overall toughness up front, do you think they could go from question and potential weakness when they were playing against elite competition last year to a flat out strength?
Yeah, I'm gonna tell you this: Clemson's run defense will be top 10 in the country this year. There's no doubt in my mind, and it should have been last year. There was no, they were top 10 the year before. So last year was an anomaly. It's like, what happened? Where did these guys get? They weren't top 10 the year before, but they were in the top 20. They were pretty decent. They led the ACC in run defense. I know that. But last year they were horrible. So how did they go from being the best to being the worst, right? Which is basically what they were last year. As all those other things I said before. So I think with Tom Allen and the way what he expects out of them, and then the way he schemes things up and how he's worked on tackling and the fundamentals, I think you're going to see a run defense with the talent. The talent's there.
Yeah.
Let's just be honest. I mean, they're there. I think with that front seven, and you throw in a guy like Sammy Brown at linebacker, I think they're as good as anybody in the country, and I think they'll be a top 10 run defense, which is what's going to make it very difficult to beat Clemson because it's going to be hard to run the football. And if you can't run the football, I don't care what kind of frisbee catching dogs you have on the outside. I don't care. If you can't run the football consistently, your quarterback is going to get killed. And they're going to keep coming after him and coming after him, coming after him. And that's going to be an advantage for Clemson because I think they can shut down the run and make teams one-dimensional. And when you make an offense one-dimensional, then you can do anything you want on defense.
Yeah, the talent is 110% here. There's a reason why PFF had Clemson's defensive line rated number one in the country. For our viewers, there's a reason why Clemson was rated that highly. Will, you briefly mentioned Sammy Brown there, the linebacker. So we'll let that be the transition here to the linebacking group for the Clemson Tigers. How does this group look overall? And it looks like, is it Wade Woodaz is going to be stepping into the middle linebacker spot?
No, I think Sammy Brown's going to be your middle linebacker. Wade's going to
Okay.
be your weak side backer. And then they're going to play a 4-2-5. So that's what they're going to be playing. So they're going to play a nickel position. So they won't really have a third linebacker necessarily unless they play a true run team, heavy run team, right? And then that would be Jamal Anderson would be that guy. But they're trying to also make Jamal more of a Sam backer where he can switch and play some of that nickel so that way you can have a better tackler on the field. And so a guy who can cover he's a smaller guy, 6'2", 215. So he's got that kind of body type, that maybe that strong safety kind of body type that can come up and play the run and can also fall back in coverage and help you there. So I think you'll see a little bit more of Jamal Anderson playing that nickel slash Sam position. Um, then, as I mentioned, Ray Woodaz is going to be your weak side backer. And then backing him up is probably going to be Kobe McLeod or D. Creighton, I think. And then in the middle, you're going to have Sammy Brown and Jermaine Alexander. Jermaine Alexander is a transfer from Alabama who is he's a dog, man. 6'2", 250 pounds. Guy is, I mean, he looks so comfortable playing in Tom Allen's defense, and to have him – and I think they're going to try to figure a way to get him and Sammy Brown on the field at the same time because they're both so good. They're both so athletic. You want to have them on the field, but at the same time, you don't want to take Wade Woodaz off either because, I mean, he's nothing but a playmaker, and he can do things in coverage. He's tall. He's lanky. He's got good range. Wade Woodaz is going to be a good NFL player one day. I'm telling you that right now. And so you got three really, really talented linebackers that they want to get them all three on the field. And so how's Tom Allen going to do that? I don't know. But I can tell you one thing this year, South Carolina played for some reason, Clemson taking Sammy Brown off the field last year in that game. And I don't know why, because South Carolina couldn't block him, and he was tackling. He's the only guy that could tackle Lenore Sellers on the field. They took him off the field, and South Carolina exploited it as you should, and then nobody could tackle Lenore Sellers. Well, if you take Sammy Brown off the field and you put Jermaine Alexander in there, he's going to be able to tackle Lenore Sellers. So you got a guy that when Sammy needs a breather, you can put him in there, and they're going to be fine. So that's going to solve the South Carolina problem, if you will, at least from Lenore Sellers running the football. So yeah, we'll see with how they use those guys. But man, they're so those three guys I mentioned are as good as any pair of group of linebackers you're going to find in the ACC. I would rank them the number one ranked linebacking core in the ACC. Which, if you told me Clemson lost Trotter in 1 year, and then the next year lose Barrett Carter, and then they would have 2 years later the best linebacking core in the ACC, I would have laughed at you. I said, "There's no way." But Sammy Brown is the real deal. Maybe one of the best linebackers I've ever seen that can run sideline to sideline. Reminds me of Anthony Simmons back in the day for Clemson. And then I think Alexander is just going to be a great fit to add with the athleticism you already get from Wade Woodaz.
So the talent and depth there is certainly top notch for the Clemson linebackers. And for our viewers, you've probably heard us talk about a couple of transfers. So yes, Clemson did in fact hit the transfer portal this year. That's
Did a
very
very good
noteworthy.
job at
Yeah,
it.
and a very good job at it at that point. So, looking at the secondary, obviously Terrell is a terrific corner. He's one of the best defensive backs in college football. But Will, go ahead and take me through the rest of this Clemson secondary. What are the expectations for the back end of the Tigers defense this fall?
Yeah, I think it starts with Avion Terrell, the younger brother of AJ Terrell, the All Pro Falcons corner. If you remember him at Clemson, he had the pick six against Alabama in the national championship game, and was one of the best of all time. You got him, and I think Ashton Hampton are going to be your starters along with Jaden Lucas. Lucas is a guy. Here's another guy that has a high ceiling. He's fought injuries his entire career, but when he plays, he's as good as anybody, especially against the run. He can be real physical. So I think because of his ability to be physical, they're gonna see them find ways to get him on the field. I know they want to have Ashton Hampton on the field. He was the freshman last year that really came on at the end of the year. Had a pick six during the season. Had a fantastic one-handed interception against Virginia Tech. I still don't know how he made it. So they really like those three guys are where it starts for them, and they're really good. Now, the question is, though, who do they have behind them? And that's where the depth becomes a concern. You got a Corian Gibson they really like, but, he's a redshirt freshman, so you don't know what you got yet. He's still kind of raw and young. You got a couple of other guys. They moved. Interesting to see what they do with Ronan Hannafin. Is he going to play safety? Is he going to play nickel? He's a guy that moved from wide receiver back into the secondary. Is he going to play safety? There's just a lot of question marks with some guys. Sheldon Lewis is a guy, though, they like, and he's a guy that can help with that nickel back position and also help with depth at the corner spots. But he's coming. He got injured a lot last year, and so he played really well a couple years ago as a freshman. Now he's coming back his junior year. Does he take that next step in his progression? I say he will, but we'll see. And then at the safety positions, there's I think Venables came back this year. That's a big plus for him in the sense that I don't know how much he's going to play, but this guy is a football coach. He's like his dad. That's Brent Venables' son,
Yeah.
his youngest boy Tyler. He's a lot like his dad. Got that mind where he's going to be a football coach. Actually, sounds like his dad when he talks. It's like if you just listen to his voice, you think you're talking to Brent Venables. But his football mind is just off the charts. So him being back is going to help that back end from a coaching standpoint, I think, more than anything. But then, they got Kyline Griffin. They feel good about him and where he's at. Rob Billings is another guy they really like. Khalil Barnes, does he take the next step now as a junior? Had a great freshman year, was so as a sophomore. Does he go back to where he was and then take a more of a step than he was as a true freshman? We're going to see. And then they got a couple other guys that they're pretty high on that they think can maybe a guy like I'm just going through as I mentioned Kylan Ricardo Jones. He's a guy that played a little bit last year. They think he's got a really high ceiling and can be really good. So the back end seems pretty strong. Depth issues and concerns at the corner position. They feel real good at safety. So we'll see. It's really if those three main guys at corner can stay healthy, and then that allows them to do a lot of different things with Sheldon Lewis, who they want to really play that nickel position, and that's going to be so big in this defense of Tom Allen's.
Well, we mentioned a ton of elite position groups for Clemson. So, do you think that Clemson can win the national championship in 2025?
I'll say this: winning the national championship is hard. So even when Clemson had those great teams where they went 4 times in 5 years to play for the national championship, I still wouldn't just commit to it because it's so hard. I will say this though: I think this is a semifinal team. I think this is a college football playoff semifinal team. So I think they can get to the semifinals, and then when you get to the semifinals, it's anybody's game. It's who plays the best. Ohio State won the national championship last year because those star players that they had finally came together, and they just played better than everybody else they played, right?
Right.
And does Clemson have the potential to do that? Yeah, but so many things happen in a football season. You got to be lucky, so you got to survive the season first of all. You got to survive injuries and things of that nature, and then you need a little bit of luck along the way. And so that's why it's so hard to say, oh yeah, this team can win a national championship. Would I put them as one of the top 5 teams to be in position? Yes, I will say they are a team that I think can position themselves to play for the national championship. Will they be there or will they win it? That remains to be seen, but I do think they can get to the semifinals. I think they're that good enough. I think they're definitely good enough to be one of the teams all year long that people are going to talk about as a contender. They will win the Atlantic Coast Conference, and I think, I think they go undefeated. I really do. I think this team's ceiling is 12-0 during the regular season, and I think probably they're no worse than 11-1. So that's a realistic view for me. I just don't see this team with 2 losses. They got a very difficult schedule, don't get me wrong, but nobody has the talent up and down that Clemson has in the Atlantic Coast Conference. And so we'll see. That LSU game and that South Carolina game is probably going to that bookends. That's probably going
Right.
to tell me what they do when it's all said and done.
And Clemson will be maybe one of, trying to think off the top of my head, 2 or 3 teams that'll be favorites in each one of their 12 regular season games. LSU, they'll probably be a 2.5 to 3.5 point favorite, getting the home field advantage there, key number. And then I think Clemson will be around a touchdown favorite or so against South Carolina by the time that game approaches. So Clemson will be a favorite in each one of their 12 games, but maybe only Notre Dame would be the other team that I could say that for when you look at their power rating, their talent, and then of course their schedule that they're going to be facing. But
Right.
most seasons, when I ask the question about Clemson, can they win it all this year? Most seasons, I would say there's 3 to 4 teams that I could comfortably say, you know what, they can win the national championship. But this year, I think that list doubles, maybe even triples to a degree. I
Yeah,
think this season
I
is
think that's
wide
fair.
open.
Yeah, I think it's fair. I think, you look at Clemson, I think Ohio State, Texas, without a doubt. You look at them, and then, Georgia. If those receivers of Georgia learn how to catch the ball, I think Georgia can be every bit as good as anybody in the country. And then, I'm trying to think off the top of my head. Miami, what do they do? Miami, I always say I try not to bet on Miami anymore because they always let me down. But they got the talent there to be in the running. I think at least for the ACC championship. And so yeah, there's those I think 5, 6 teams that I think legitimately have a chance to contend. And I think it's a good. I think you got some Big Ten teams. I think you got an ACC, 1 or 2 ACC teams. I think you got a couple Big 12 teams. And then you got a couple SEC teams. And I think that's what makes college football exciting. When nobody wants to see one conference just had the whole playoff field. We don't want to see that. Nobody does. And you want to see different varieties. You want to have that diversity in the playoffs where it's like the NCAA basketball tournament, right? I mean, that's what makes the NCAA basketball tournament so fun is because anybody can lose on any given day, and that's what we want in the college football playoff.
And we've seen some upsets a lot in the postseason for baseball already. There's been a
Yes.
ton of upsets. So,
Exactly. Clemson's one of them. Clemson didn't make it out of its own regional. And as much as the Clemson people hated that, that's probably good for baseball because West Virginia moves on and makes it exciting. And that's a good little story with West Virginia this year. So, we'll see. We'll see what happens. But I think Clemson is definitely in that conversation as one of those 5 or 6 teams that can win a national championship this year. And if you don't believe that, then you don't know college football. You're not paying attention. This Clemson team is really talented. They got really good coaches. Dabo's done a great job restocking his coaches. When you look at Matt Luke and Tom Allen, and they got other guys they got on that staff that have been there for a couple of years now, and Nick Eason, former NFL coach, as well as Chris Rump, another former NFL coach. They got talented coaches, and then I mentioned Garrett Riley earlier, now in his third season as offensive coordinator. They got talented coaches up and down that roster, and then you add that to the talent they have on the field and the personnel. It makes for a nice marriage, and I think they're positioned to contend for another national championship. There's no doubt in my mind.
Well, Will, really good job previewing the Clemson Tigers. One last time for our viewers, tell them where they can find your content.
Yeah, go to theclemsoninsider.com. We have all kind of not just regular stories and columns from me, but also we do a good job recruiting. Jason Priester, our recruiting guy, he does a great job. And right now, Dabo Sweeney's camps are going on, so you want to go check that out to see the who's. Because trust me, there's some pretty darn good talent down here again this week and next week for Clemson's football camps. So you want to go check that out, and then and then we have obviously all the other sports for Clemson athletics as well that we cover with our other writers that we have on staff. We got a pretty big crew and got some good writers and good photographers. So you want to go check us out, the Clemson Insider. You can find me personally at Steeler Will on X, and you can find our website at Clemson Insider on X, and then also at the Clemson Insider on Facebook.
Well, again, Will, really good job. We appreciate you being on the channel.
All right, Connor, thanks for having me, buddy.
Yeah.